Act 1, low birth weight puppies. So the first one is Sid, our tiny baby puppy. Remember the tiny puppy?
Yeah, Sid,
tiny Sid.
who is now
Scarlet. So Sid was born, she was 3.5 ounces, I think. I think she was 3.5 ounces. If that. And our normal is 8 to 12, I would say. 8.5 to 12 ounces. So she was just tiny. And, she came out and she suckled right away, which for us is a threshold, right? That they have to nurse. They have to want to nurse. People kept asking me, is she going to make it? Of course, Facebook, everybody, the little one. I mean, yeah, it's heartbreaking.
And why not?
And I kept saying, I don't know. I kept saying, not only don't I know, I said, there's no way to know. But she's nursing so that she's crossed that threshold. She's nursing, but I don't know. And then, the days went by and she did okay. We had some issues with her getting cold. That was a problem. She would get cold because of her body size was so little, and probably also blood sugar was, more of an issue because of the small body size. So, I did make sure that I defended her, made sure she got a good place on the teat. I provided an extra heat source for her, so I always made sure she was snuggled into a warm neck warmer. Velvet would be kind of upset by her sometimes. And, a lot of breeders will say, mother knows best, it's nature, if she's rejecting it. But, here's the thing about that, is that many times the dam will be rejecting a puppy just because it's a little cold or the body temperature is a little bit lower, even if it's not totally chilled. Or the blood sugar might not be quite right. And these are things that are really, there's nothing inherently wrong with the puppy. It's just that the small body size, it chilled easier. So, I was working hard to keep her warm. But it was really still from time to time upsetting to Velvet. So I tried to sneak her out of the box. That didn't work because Velvet knew she was missing and she went nuts. So, it was kind of a catch-22, darned if you do and darned if you don't. And I will be honest, it was getting to the point for Mark and I where it was so upsetting and disruptive to Velvet and the rest of the litter that we were worried that the rest of the puppies in Velvet were suffering. And I was right on the edge of just like, I just don't even know. This puppy's so tiny. Is she going to make it? And it's upsetting everyone. And maybe we're doing the wrong thing to keep her alive. Because she also was scrawny and just terrible looking. And, but she was nursing. And then right after that, she sort of turned a corner. I don't know if you remember that, honey, but she sort of turned a corner and she just started gaining and doing a lot better. And Velvet settled down.
Yeah.
But I still was sort of in the dark about if she was going to make it. And if she did make it, more specifically, was she going to be normal? Was she going to be neurologically normal? I mean, what were we looking at here with this puppy? What kind of possible defects? I didn't know. But she moved normally. She nursed normally. She was strong. So there we were. So now comes my part about the story and my story and how my story almost kept me from learning something. So we put up pictures of her all the time. Of course, she had a whole following. And somebody said, isn't her head abnormally large? And I very reflexively said, no, bull terriers have big heads. They have big heads. That's how they look. And it's true. Bull terriers do have big heads in comparison to their bodies. And in fact, there's a great article by Winky McKay-Smith on type in the bull terrier where she specifically talks about it and says it's one of the things that artists tend to get wrong, and judges too, when they're judging or drawing bull terriers, is proportionately the head is large. It's what gives them that they almost look like they're going to tip over onto their heads. Yeah. Right, they do. They almost look like, those fish eye things when you're looking through it and the head's really big and the body's little. Yeah. I mean, not that extreme, but that's sort of the effect. It's the head is big. But here's the thing. That puppy, the head was really big and the body was really scrawny. But I just, I had this strong thing in my head, almost reflexive, like, no. The head's supposed to be big because that's my tribe, right? I'm a bull terrier fancier and I know and you don't know and the head's big and it's supposed to be big. And I just, even though at the time I remember looking at it and thinking, yeah, her head is big, my just knee jerk was no, that's normal. But then this woman, Patty Brill Harbison, who's very smart, wrote in and said, oh no, that's IUGR, it's normal. And in fact, it's asymmetrical IUGR. She's going to be fine. So,
yeah.
Of course, I'm like, well, what the heck is IUGR and what's going on? So IUGR is intrauterine growth restriction. And what it means is that the animal, human or puppy, somehow had growth restriction in utero. And there's a lot of reasons it can happen, but basically there's asymmetrical and symmetrical. Symmetrical is where the puppy is born proportionately small. It's like a perfect little puppy, but it's just small. And then you have asymmetrical, where the puppy is born and it's a little bit of a Frankenstein puppy. It has a ginormous head and a scrawny little body with no subcutaneous fat. It almost looks like wasted away, like a little old man. And, so those puppies, those asymmetrical puppies really are not as attractive. The little tiny ones look nicer. But here's the crazy thing. When it's symmetrical, so those good-looking little tiny ones, that means it happened probably in the first half of the pregnancy. And the prognosis is actually worse for those puppies, ironically, because in the first half of the pregnancy is when the neural tube is being formed. And that is when you get profound birth defects. And if there's any growth restriction during that time for any reason, it can have profound effects developmentally and neurologically on the puppy, because fundamentally that whole system is being formed then. In fact, with certain kinds of defects in humans, like the thalidomide babies, that it was a drug that they gave to women that just, caused horrible defects. With thalidomide babies, they can actually tell exactly when the exposure was by the defect. They actually have like a chart. So you can say, well, if it's legs, it happened at this time. Because each of these things, it's a critical period for the formation of each of these things. And if anything happens, any growth restriction, any toxins, it will affect profoundly for the rest of the animal. As opposed to when it happens in the second half, the fundamental embryo has been formed. So now what happens is the puppy can go to what we call brain sparing strategy. So the body basically is wasted at the expense of the brain. So the puppy will develop neurologically normal, or the baby, because it's the same thing in humans. So when you have that puppy that's born that just looks like, again, a Frankenstein puppy, scrawny little body, big head, that actually is a good indicator, because it means that probably neurologically that puppy has a better chance of growing up normally. So your cute little puppies with all the, regular chubby little tiny puppy, and that puppy, not as good a chance of living. So, now I could say to people, hey, you know what? Actually, I think her chances are pretty good. And in fact, she's doing great right now. She's already got barn hunt titles. She's been to some dog shows.
Man, were you wrong?
Yeah. Was I wrong? Was I wrong? And was my story ever so strong that even as my eyes were seeing it and my brain was even registering like, yeah, no, that puppy doesn't look good, my mouth or fingers were typing, no, that's normal. That's normal because this is my story. My story is that bull terriers have big heads. What do you think about that, honey?
I mean, I understand what you're saying. Was this public? Everybody saw your response? And somebody had the courage to step up and say, actually, you're wrong.
Yep.
This is what it is.
Yep. Well, she didn't say, well, you're wrong. She said, this is what this is. And,
Well, no,
and
she,
I
she
really
didn't say verbally you're wrong, but she says, no, you're wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And again, that's, it's in a public forum and you're like, whoa, but for me, I think here's the thing. Once you take that step to saying, when someone puts out something that shows me that I actually am wrong, for me, now that I have this mindset of being wrong is growth, I'm like, wow, Patty, thank you. That's amazing. I did not know that. So that now becomes, for me, a position of strength.
Because you have a little bit of freedom, I guess, too, huh? You have to worry about being right all the time.
You don't have to, because listen, anybody who comes and tells you, I'm right all the time, this is the way it is, and you just do what I do, and what I do is the right thing, run from that person because they don't know what they're talking about. Can't be. No, it's just not. Because if you're never, listen, the world is growing. Knowledge grows every day. We know more every day. So that was our little puppy story that we learned a lot about.